Hello, and welcome to a pretty special video. I was invited by one of the GMs of Elsword to playtest a character early on the playtest servers. I was given a code for me and two of the people in my group, my guild. I gave them access to play with me on the test server so that we could all enjoy ourselves and see about the character. I guess I'll start with the things that I really appreciated about the experience as a whole, and then we'll talk about Laby and the likes and dislikes that I have to start with talking about her. So thank you so much to the GM who reached out to me and gave me the opportunity to play on the test server, and thank you to the two people who played with me, and we all seem to enjoy ourselves and have a good time overall. Alright, now the likes and dislikes about the character as a whole. Break it down into different sections and then deliberate from there. So the first section we're going to talk about is gameplay. What does Laby play like? And at first glance, she seems like a typical monk archetype character, i.e. she uses lots of commands, punches and kicks to get the job done. And we thought we were going to get with a character like Windsneaker, or a character like Reckless Fist, or a character like Lunatic Psyker. Your third job paths being Windsneaker and Nemos, Reckless Fist being Rage Hearts now, and Lunatic Psyker being Doombringer. Unfortunately, those characters don't really live up to the promise of being a strictly melee or heavily leaning towards melee combatant. The closest, in my opinion, being Windsneaker and I suppose Rage Hearts? Yeah, I'd say those two are the closest that we've ever gotten to purely martial artist in the game. Lunatic Psyker being too many energy projectiles to really consider him being an all-out brawler type character. But yes, she is, without a doubt, the most strictly monk brawler archetype type character that we've got in the game ever. Coming down to her base not skills, but her base commands and the way she moves around, and just the overall feel of the character is very grounded in hand-to-hand combat, and I really appreciate that. And I hope people who are excited about a character like that would also get that same feeling out of playing this character. So out of our gameplay, the thing that I think is the crowning jewel that they achieved when making her moveset is the way she moves. The movement of this character is the freest, the most explorative, and the most interesting movement system that we've ever had in any character in the game. I would assume, I guess the character that would come the closest to her would be Aura. Having access to an airwalk, double jump, and overall the ability to chain different air movement options into each other kind of seamlessly. She is the best at doing this. She has very, very good points of ending input where you can do a motion and immediately go into another motion, therefore canceling that animation, so that if you air dash, you can immediately jump out of it. And it's extremely context sensitive, well, not context sensitive, but it's sensitive to ending the animation on your terms, so that when you input something, there's no harsh buffering system, there's no lag where you're like stuck in an animation and you can't really do anything about it. It's very, very free-flowing in nature, and I really appreciate that. And for a platform fighter like this, in my opinion, it is often the most important thing to get right. How the character moves and traverses the levels and can get from point A to point B with the most options that your character gives you, and for any situation, just having the most options to get from point A to point B in the most creative way possible, or most efficient way possible, depending on your playstyle, is extremely important, and I think they nailed it. This is the best character movement system in the game, bar none. And I think that that alone makes her just interesting from a either design perspective or just a casual, I want to just test out moving around with this character. The next part of her gameplay is, of course, her combat. And starting with her commands. Her commands are interesting as you don't really have the raw, I guess, punching and kicking animations that you would from either Windsneaker, Nemos, or Rage Hearts. Her punches and kicks have a very distinct energy effect or augmentation to her punches and kicks, where she has like the general kind of childlike flailing around of her arms and legs to like kick things, but they're all like hugely augmented by this pink energy augmentation that comes out as like a kind of a mana thing or a aura. Like this pink aura comes out of her punches and kicks, and it has a huge hitbox, deceptively big. And the positive side of that is, well, you don't really have to think about how to aim your punches and kicks. You just kind of throw them out, and you will more than likely hit your target because of the completely huge amount of area that you have in front of you. It's kind of a disjointed hitbox from her actual body part to the aura that comes out. And I think that's nice. I think it's really good. Not necessarily in concept, but also in practice, where I can kind of space things out from either close range, medium range, or even long range, and still kind of get into the groove of doing attacks and linking them to other things. So I'm really a big fan of the aura that comes out of her attacks. On the negative side, though, the way that the aura the way you have to manipulate and learn how each of the different aura, and by extension each of the different attacks, behave when you try to train them into each other. So the basic ZZZZ combo, 4 Zs. The first 2 Zs are your standard like grounded OTG punch, and a character like Ad also has the same thing, where he just throws out his psionic electricity pulses twice, and it's just a standard loop where you can just ZZ over and over again, and it has a cancel point, which is really nice. Even at 0 attack speed, it's pretty consistent. After that, just like Ad, the third Z will do a launch, and the aura will also, the aura and her actual melee attack range have sort of the same properties where it will launch them. So even if they're sort of out of range, the aura will send them launching to the air. And if you're in a party with people who don't really care about KDs and knocking enemies away, it's not that bad. But when you're in a party with other people, the fact that her basic 3Z combo will end up launching enemies that aren't super armored or nailed to the ground, that's not very conducive to party play, because the enemies will be flying around everywhere in the hands of a person who is inexperienced or doesn't want to learn, or just accidentally does it when they mess up their ZZ loops on the ground. And it has only further compounded the issue with her fourth Z being this kick that is a huge explosion and will send the enemies farther and farther away. And even for her, catching the enemy after that move is going to take a little finagling from you, either using an active or skill or some kind of fancy maneuvering to catch the enemy before they hit the ground. Which admittedly isn't too hard with the character, but like first impressions, it's a harder learning curve for them to get used to that, and in party play, it's going to hugely disrupt people who are working together. But when you're working with other Labies, it's not really an issue because everybody has the huge hitboxes and can usually catch or stabilize the enemy so that they don't get KD'd when they come back down. But not every character really has a stabilizing move for getting the enemies down, and the situations that you'll get into in like general play. And to go on from there, her skills are really good for the most part, even at base. She has, of course, the typical monk augmentation of her abilities called Inner Aurora, one of my favorite skills that she has, where she just basically buffs her physical attack power, and she has the ability to recharge her system, her gauge beads that give you more MP on hit. It will just recharge automatically if you don't use them by using commands, and it's really good for like the general monk archetype, for that to be her starting base skill, a kind of focus move where you channel your aura into yourself and then you're able to dish out more damage. A beautiful complement to the whole archetype and her system in general. Then you have the other move, where if you get hit, certain other characters have had moves like this in the past, and they've been reworked or removed altogether. Two notable moves being the two Eins had a move. The first Path Ein, Richter, back when he was just Thaumaturge. The first Path Ein, when he was just Thaumaturge, had the move Fragarok, and he could activate this skill upon being hit, and it was basically a front-facing volley of energy projectiles, and it was kind of a threat in PvP, especially because you couldn't really attack him from head-on if he has enough mana, because you're constantly under the threat of him changing the tides of battle by hitting you, punishing you for catching him from the front, which is a video in and of itself. But you also have the opposite problem when fighting characters like when you fought the second Einpath, or Blue in Emotion, or just Blue in now. He had a move called Elf, which would activate upon, well, the person playing could activate it upon being hit from the back, and it just kind of teleported you away from the fight. And you could also catch off of it or confirm hits before the opponent hit the ground after getting hit by the skill. And a couple other characters have similar systems as well. Black Massacre or Crimson Rose. Black Massacre had the Western Fire, and she could activate that from the front or the back to shoot you as she got hit. It is still a pretty contentious move when fighting that character in PvP. And something we've had for a long time is the Blade Master passive, where if you hit him from behind, he will evac out at random points, and basically you have to reset the fight if you're attacking him from behind, and you just consistently do damage. It will randomly proc at some point, so you always have to have that in the back of your mind when you're fighting him from a PvP perspective. In PvE, all of these things are to help you in situations where you just want to escape getting hit or in a combo string or anything like that when fighting enemies. For the most part, you don't get into situations like this towards endgame, because generally people are like clearing so fast and so hard that small mobs are not really an issue. But for people at the middling power range, or who are just getting to endgame, or anything before that, you're not really doing that. So you're under much more of a threat to common enemies if you're playing a little bit recklessly or using a niche build or anything like that. So Laby has a move called Bang Bang, and all of her moves have a kind of onomatopoeias, as she is very childlike, and her skill moves also reflect her personality. And basically it allows you to get hit, and then you will teleport out of the mirror somewhere far away, usually to the right side is what I encountered. I don't know if it activates based on where you get hit or from which side you get hit on, but generally it teleports you to the right side. And it's a neat little evac move, and it's especially useful for her dungeons, as the enemies will crowd around her pretty easily. And the fact that she is a more in-your-face combat-oriented character is extremely useful for situations like that, for her more than some of the other characters that I mentioned before. Another thing I liked from Laby is just overall her aesthetic is really nice. I like her color scheme, the pinks, the whites, the harsh dark blues from Nisha, and the kind of light blues also from Nisha, and the little gem that is in the shape of a seed, teardrop shape, on the front part of her breastplate on her dress. I really like that a lot. I think they're really soft colors, very inviting colors, and reflects her kind of bubbly personality. I also like the aesthetic of her overall dungeons and the hometown being Dark Forest themed, but the twist of the NPCs being like woodland creatures and the creatures from the Black Forest. I like that aesthetic a lot. Very Alice in Wonderland-like, and I hope to see more of that from the newer characters. If they add any new characters if they add any new characters going forwards, which is the highest possibility that's definitely going to happen, given the reception of this character already in Korea. And I love the aesthetic of most of her moves being like these huge pink explosions, bombastic. I like the sound design of a lot of her moves being these kind of popping noises. And I love the sound of the impacts of her hits. They're very chunky, arcadey, and raw. And overall, I'm very impressed with the work that's gone into that end of the character. Special note of things like the music of the dungeons and the waiting, or the main town area that she has. The music has been of high quality, and depending on who you ask, if you ask me, a lot of the music in the game is of poor to middling quality, with some standout tracks here and there, but almost all of the music from her areas have been great. I don't know who they've contracted to do the soundtrack, the OSTs to do the OSTs for her dungeons and the town music, but it's good. I'm very happy with the different arrangements and the different tunes that they've had composed, and the very, very striking Chinese Oriental music derived from the instruments that they've chosen. A lot of the instruments being traditional Chinese in certain areas, and I'm a big fan of where the music a direction that's been going for a while, ever since Linux. So I thought there was a special note to talk about that. Another thing I want to bring note to is the story for this character. They wanted to try something completely different. Instead of trying to squeeze her into the story as they did with Ein, they opted to go a completely different route and expand the story in ways that I didn't think that they were really interested in going into. Ever since we expanded the world to the demon realm, I really appreciate where the story is going. Ever since the party, the main ill crew, went to the demon world, and a special note to what I think is the best told story in the game, even though I haven't finished everything in Varnamir, so I don't really know the Rosso story or anything that came of that, but the Solace backstory that we get from Halted Sun's memory is probably my favorite story in the entire game. It gave him really good characterization, the backstory that I think is kind of reminiscent of what happened to Raven, which I wish they would go into more detail into, because I also think there's a lot of potential there for good storytelling. But I really love the journey we see Solace go on to, from being a boy and being kind of outcast of his family, and infatuation with a young girl that gets brought in, that he doesn't really know how to communicate his feelings with her, and it leads to him not confessing or really being the person that he wants to be at her in time, for him to stop her becoming the power source and sacrificing her life for everybody else, and then he betrays the order, and he essentially kind of destroys the world, more or less. So it's like all his fault. But you see his reasonings, and you see exactly why he's in the position that he's in right now, because it's a really well done. It's really well done in the way it's laid out, and how the characters talk to each other. The dialogue is well written, in my opinion, to like get the points across that we need to have his motivations in check, and to have the side characters behave in the way that they do. And especially the presentation of the story, I think, is unmatched in any other part of the game. So it seems like they're taking that route of the storytelling with Laby as well, where it's very well done in its presentation. It's very clear what the characters want. The dialogue is really nice, and the dialogue is good. The dialogue gets across what it needs to shape the personalities of the characters. Laby's character is very well defined, and I will be diving more deeply into it and giving my thoughts on it in greater detail once she releases fully and I'm able to like digest the story and read it piece by piece, which is a rare happenstance, because usually most people just kind of click enter and escape, completely ignore the story. But here I'm actually really intrigued into seeing more of this character and what she has to offer, and knowing her backstory being the most interesting part, because it's pretty apparent that she's from the demon realm, which is basically just another Elrios type world. Like, it's a whole globe in and of itself, kind of a parallel universe. And I really like it when games open up their world building in ways like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a parallel universe or anything like that, but just opening the scope of where the setting is. We get to see different parts of Floam, we get to see different parts of Velder, and places that we've known this whole time, but we see them from different context points. And we get to see that there are different nations that exist other than the ones that we've been told this entire time, and they have like meaningful character interactions with people's lives that interconnect and have reference points to other peoples and events and other clans and cultures that we get to see. I'm very much a fan of world building and setting development in this regard, especially seeing it through another character's point of view instead of having it retconned and the story like completely overhauled. Why not just take it from another character's perspective and push it in that direction? I think that was a inspired choice by the writing team. And I'm also a fan of the focus on plot points that have been in the game for a long time but just haven't been developed. Instead of going off into strange new frontiers but having like the same kind of writing quality where we don't really care about it, instead to opt to focus on plot points that we already have but just recontextualize them and flesh them out to a greater point of view and make the presentation one worth caring about, and not necessarily in your face, but it's more prominent and there's a sense of urgency to have that story there, to have the emotional beats make sense, and that you care about the characters and the plots and the stories that make up this world. And I think the game has lacked that ever since, at least when I started playing. It hasn't really been one that I would care to really dive into. It's just been kind of a passive thing on the backside, the outskirts of the things that you really care about when playing a game like this. And I think that they're putting in the work and they're making the right steps to rectify that issue that's been an issue for a long time. I also like the fact that the demon realm isn't just they're crafting it in a way so that, assuming this is true and Laby is from the demon realm, but from not the same kind of demonic power, or she doesn't have the same demonic powers as the demons we've already encountered, but she's not even of the same race or the same ilk of type of demons that we've encountered so far, therefore giving it kind of a parallel to the Elvios world, or even the real world, where there's going to be different people or different clans, different cultures that have different ways of attaining power, or learning how to live off the land, or just different ways of harnessing energy. So we have people who may get their energy from the sea, or you have people who may get their energy from land, or you may get people who get their energy from rivers or fossil fuels, or just any number of things, wind. So the elves get their energy from a semi-divine like being, but there's another sect of people that may get their energy from the dark L, which is like I guess you can treat that as a fossil fuel, because it's like a crystalline like substance. Or you can get people who power themselves off of the natural force of I guess what the energy you would call like aura or ki or something like that. It comes from within, and they like harness it to do miraculous things. So I think Laby may come from like a sect of people like that, and I think that would be interesting to have different power schemes inside of a world we only thought that only had one typical power scheme and one typical type of demon or race of people that live there. And that's all I have to say about the story. I like it, and I'm looking forward to where it goes from here. And to summarize, I like Laby's gameplay system a lot, going from her movement system to her commands to her skills and how they interplay with each other. I like it a lot, and I want to see it developed, though my harsh criticisms towards the gameplay is that it has a harsh learning curve for newcomers. I think the commands should be the star of PvE, and we should not be defaulting back to using pots to throw skills out. I think the Wind Slicer vibe shot meta, I guess you want to call it, should be the way the game is like balanced towards the people who want to play more aggressively combat oriented, to have it be viable so that they can actually clear within like a decent time frame. And there should be people who want to just throw out their skills as normal. And I think there should be a balancing act, like have a skill set up so that you can choose to either be a hard command only or command centered user of the character, or you have a person who's more into using the skills. I think that would benefit the variety and the breadth of PvE a lot. And since it is the monk character, that would make the most sense to like bring that to the forefront. I think that should be something that is considered going forward. I also think that her skills should be a little bit more combat oriented. Her first line is supposed to be like a monk, and she's kind of like throwing a lot of energy balls and magic around, when I would rather see more attacks like Laby Thunder, where it's just like a combination move, like a Street Fighter Super or something like that. I would like more moves like that instead of the big energy balls. Her aesthetic is nice, pleasant, warming, relaxing, childlike, friendly, and I'm into it. Sort of like a Wind Waker-esque art style, where it's like very pastel, I like it a lot. I like the music. I think the music has been going in a good direction ever since Lanix, so just keep it up in that area. I think the story has lots of intrigue and is giving it a little bit more urgency and a little bit more care and respect that would come out of making a good story that is worth people not just clicking enter to skip. And that's about it. I really enjoyed this character. Thank you to the GM who gave me the opportunity to play the test server early, and thank you to the people who played with me. And we'll be making more videos on her and other things in the future. Please look forward to it. And I'll see you guys later.
눈을 감아붙었다 해 슬픔 투성이 얼굴로 아주 긴 시간이 흐른 것 같아 떠난 하루를 세어봐